The Good Party is calling for the removal of Western Cape Transport MEC Bonginkosi Madikizela from the Western Cape Provincial Cabinet. This after the AAily Maverick reported that Madikizela does not have a BCOM degree, despite his official biography claiming that he does. The Good Party Secretary General Brett Herron joins us to talk about this. Brett, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight. Did you find it as a surprise, this revelation by the AAily Maverick?
Good evening, Thabo. I mean, it is surprising that someone who has served in a provincial cabinet since 2009, so who has been appointed 3 times by 2 premiers, has a CV which claims a degree that he doesn't have. So that part is surprising, that someone was appointed on 3 different occasions following 3 general elections, claiming to have a BCOM degree, and in fact he doesn't have it. But it is part of a pattern that is emerging around Madikizela. 2 weeks ago, the public protector found that he had also lied to Parliament in 2019 and recommended or instructed the Premier to deal with him by today, actually.
Yeah. I mean, yourself, you also come from the Democratic Alliance and you've been in the same party as the MEC. What do you think could have been the oversight that would have allowed the MEC, I suppose, to keep that misinformation for 12 years on record?
Well, first of all, I'm not so sure that the information wasn't well known, or known at least by some within the party. I think the timing is interesting, as Madikizela puts his hand up to be a candidate for Mayor of Cape Town for the DA. So I think the information may well have been known beforehand, but is being used now in a way to eliminate him as a candidate for Mayor of Cape Town. But there must be something wrong with the vetting process undertaken by both Premier Helen Zille and Premier Alan Winde. They only had to vet 10 people. That's who the size of their cabinet. And the fact that they didn't vet the qualifications is worrisome, because the DA preaches that their appointees are always fit for purpose and suitably qualified for the roles that they're appointed to. But how do you assess that someone is fit for purpose and qualified if you haven't checked that they actually have the qualifications they claim to have?
Now, it seems the MEC says, well, I take full responsibility for my non-disclosure or disclosure of false information, but he's refusing to resign. He's standing his ground.
I would like him to resign, because I think it would be the one honourable thing that he could do to salvage any reputation that he may have. The fact that he's refusing to resign, I think, is problematic, and I think this calls on the Democratic Alliance and the Premier to remove him. I know that he's claiming that there is no requirement that he has a qualification to be an MEC or a mayor for that either, but it's not a matter of whether you are required to have a qualification. It's true, you do not need to have a qualification to enter politics. But the Executive Ethics Act and the Executive Ethics Code requires honesty and integrity in office, and he's certainly failed on both counts, which disqualifies him to serve in the executive of any government in South Africa.
Yeah. Well, it's not the first time that such an argument has been raised in the Democratic Alliance, that to hold office, a qualification is not a requirement. So I suppose he's not saying something that is out of the party norms.
I mean, it's true. A qualification is not required. It must be, being a political appointee must be the only job in the world where you don't need a qualification or some sort of experience. But the Executive Ethics Code and the Executive Ethics Act, and he is a member of the executive, requires honesty. It is a breach of the Executive Ethics Code to mislead the Premier when you're appointed to an executive, and he's already demonstrated that he's misled 3 premiers. And the whole spirit of the legislation, the Executive Ethics Act, requires honesty and integrity in order to hold that office. Yeah. So the DA may not require him to have a qualification, and he may not need a qualification in order to serve in that function, but he has now breached the Executive Ethics Act, I believe, by acting dishonestly.
I mean, if, for example, we, Brett, go by your theory that this was, the timing of it is suspect, and it could possibly be that maybe the DA no longer has use for MEC Madikizela. In fact, they feel he's no longer fit for purpose. Why call for his resignation? Because clearly they'll get rid of him all on their own.
Well, I think they're playing a very delicate balancing act in managing this candidate selection for Cape Town mayoral position. If they manage to eliminate Madikizela, who is the provincial leader, based on this leak of this false qualification, it paves the way for Jordan Hill-Lewis, who appears to be the inner cabal's favoured candidate for this mayoral position. It paves the way for him to be the leading candidate, and they don't have to explain why they're eliminating their provincial leader, who also didn't manage to get the premier position and who happens to be black.
Yeah, I mean, one would also argue that it's not in the party's interest, I suppose, to remove a black leader and elevate a white leader in his place at this particular point. It would be a bad move for the party. So, yeah, I mean, that is just an argument that one would forward to say, surely, Brett, the party cannot do that.
Well, that's exactly the point, that it is caught in such a difficult space with regards to its attitude towards race, its attempt to not see race, but it keeps putting its foot in their own mouth when it comes to race relations and race issues. So if they can eliminate Madikizela on a basis that has got apparently nothing to do with race, then they kind of squeak past that difficulty that they have around race. So in other words, if they are able to eliminate him based on this false qualification, then they can avoid the race argument. Right.
Now, of course, there is the question of the public protector's remedial action. In my conversation with Premier Windi, he said they were waiting for MEC Madikizela to make representations around the issues that were raised by the public protector. Are you saying that time has now expired?
The time has expired, and there's no provision in the legislation for the Premier to wait for Madikizela to make representations. The Constitutional Court has already ruled on this. They were very emphatic when it came to President Zuma. He was instructed he had to follow the Public Protector's instructions. The Public Protector has instructed Alan Winde as Premier to act against Madikizela, and he needs to act, and today was the last day to do so. So from tomorrow, Premier Alan Winde is now in breach of the Executive Ethics Code if he doesn't act against Madikizela. And I mean, I know that Madikizela's attempting was alluded to the fact that he's taking legal advice about the legality of the Public Protector's report, but the 14-day period does expire today.
And what action then will come from the Good Party on that score?
Well, we'll have to go back to the Public Protector to report a breach by the Premier in failing to implement the Public Protector's report, and that would be a breach of the Ethics Code by the Premier Alan Winde. So it's an unfortunate position to be in, but the Democratic Alliance cannot on one hand demand action from presidents, they demanded it from President Zuma, and then not implement the Public Protector's report when it doesn't suit them.
Brett Herron, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. The Good Party Secretary General there, Brett Herron, calling for the Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, to take action against the MEC for Transport, Bonginkosi Madikizela.